We've got RPSs. They're defined in two ways. You can either do a target generation that meets all, that's based on all renewable resource for all renewable resources, or it's a percentage of total generation. The first is Texas, for example. The second would be New Jersey. New Jersey says it's X percent. In fact, for solar, wind, wave, or tidal in New Jersey, it's 9.572%. Whereas in Texas, they've basically said, okay, by 2015, the total renewable generation target is 5.88 gigawatts. And the renewable energy requirements are allocated to each retailer by market share. So again, rules and regulations are different by state. So how you actually behave and have to comply in different states is different. So it's creates certain logistical problems. It creates certain risk management type problems. How do you report your positions? What's your portfolio really worth? If a particular instrument has one value in one state, another value in another state. And yet you perhaps have an RPS requirement in the first state. So while the value of the REC might be cheaper in that state where you have the RPS requirement, you could actually make more money by selling it into another state and potentially buying RECs from someone in your first state. So I mean, these are, again, that's a trading opportunity, but it also engenders complexity. Give you an idea of the patchwork quilt. This is from the database of state incentives for renewables and efficiency. But you can see that essentially it really is a patchwork quilt. It's very hard, and all of these regulations are constantly changing. So trying to keep up with this is no mean feat. In the SREC side of things, this is just in the Northeast. The fungibility between the states varies. So for example, in Pennsylvania, you can actually apply DC, Pennsylvania, or Ohio SRECs, solar renewable energy credits. But in New Jersey there, you'll see you can only apply New Jersey credits, which is one of the reasons why SRECs in New Jersey are trading at pretty hefty prices. New Jersey also happens to have a fairly stiff RPS requirement as well. So this leads to valuation complexities. It's something that we've been talking to the vendors. The vendors are all aware of these complexities, and they're working to figure out ways, what is the most optimal way to be able to figure out how we can price these things across these various jurisdictions. Other types of things of market impediments. You've got RPS auctions which involve sealed bids. These favor the larger players. They offer little price transparency. You don't see a lot of demand in auction. And if I could recover my Reggie slide, you'd actually see kind of the progression of the various auctions. I think they've had 8 auctions so far. The prices have been relatively stable. They've been coming down somewhat. They actually took a little bit of a dive when the federal bill was shelved for CO2. But what you find is that pretty much most of the participants, it was originally there were a lot of some more speculative type players. Gradually those players became just more the hardcore utility folks who actually need to be in these markets in order to comply. You got a lot less of the sort of wheeler dealer, let's just buy and sell based on the fact that, hey, if price goes up, we can make a little money. REC unbundling is limited, so in certain states you can't decouple the RECs from the power. You've got these fungibility constraints. There are no national or regional standards for RECs. They're all on a statewide, on a state basis. And as someone at this March conference said, all of these markets, unlike pretty much any other market except perhaps for the weather derivatives market, all of these markets exist or cease to exist at the stroke of a pen. So you could be sitting on a huge portfolio that you say, wow, I got billions of dollars worth of these things. And all of a sudden, Congress or the state legislature decides, well, we don't like that program anymore. Gone. You're now sitting on nothing. So it's rather curious in that sense. And the real problem is, of course, is when you've got that sort of uncertainty, how far deep do you want to go? How far do you want to go into that market? If you're thinking, well, geez, in a year's time, they could basically shelve the whole thing and we're done. It's certainly something that I've sort of had in the back of my mind for my project to try and figure out, well, geez, this is something I really want to embark on. As it is, I actually sold forward my REC generation for 5 years. Basically, it covers my cost. My project is basically pretty much covered. The weird thing is the installer who's actually doing the aggregation of all of his customers' RECs, first of all, I had to explain a little bit about what I wanted to do and why I wanted to sell forward. And then he turned around and he said, okay, well, I'll just guarantee those prices for you for the first 5 years. I'm like, cool, you've even taken the delivery risk away from me. I have no obligation to deliver to you now. If I deliver, you'll pay me the price, but if I don't deliver, you just pay me nothing and I'm good to go. Whereas if I had actually gone out into, say, SREC trade and sold them, obviously I would have a delivery obligation. Even if I didn't build my project, I'd still have to find, the 10 or 11 RECs that I would sell forward. Market outlook, again, the Kerry-Lieberman bill got scratched. The new bill focuses on oil rig disaster plans and other bits and pieces, but really doesn't talk anything much about renewables or carbon or anything like that. It's uncertain when we're going to have a national RPS or carbon regime. The EPA will be ending the Clean Air Interstate Rule and plans to implement this Clean Air Transport Rule, basically because CARE is not improving air quality in downwind states. CARE was basically sort of the successor to the Clean Air Act. The Clean Air Act was basically what you saw with the NOx and SOx and that huge reduction between 95 and 08. When they introduced CARE a few years ago, they've now found that it really hasn't been doing quite what they expected it to do. What it's likely to do is eliminate federal EA trading schemes, replace them with a state-by-state framework, so kind of going to the opposite of what we would perhaps like in terms of clarity and ease of trading and what have you. Again, you'll get more in the way of a patchwork quilt. Some 31 states are likely to be affected, so 31, but oh, hang on, in the renewable energy markets we've got 29. You can see where these complexities sort of start to overlay each other. The specifics are expected to be announced sometime mid-next year as to what exactly this is going to contain. Now let's get on to some of the fun and amusement. Why are we actually here? Emissions 8.1 is one of the new components that the official release, we are already in the process of implementing it for one of our clients. I believe the official release is actually going to be next month, although I was able to grab from Allegro's website a brochure about it dated sometime in July this year. The core and the key is that it is fully integrated with the Allegro 8.0 platform. In fact, when I asked my colleague for some details and some screenshots, he's like, well, there's not a whole hell of a lot to show because a lot of the functionality just dovetails so well with what the existing 8.0 platform does that, I can give you like 2 or 3 screenshots, which is what I have here. It includes an emission-specific table structure that closely overlaps other commodities. So basically, as you look at the trade screen, you're going to see some emission-specific fields, as well as all of the regular fields that you would see on any other type of commodity trade entry screen. And the beauty is that it integrates seamlessly with your current 8.0 front, mid, and back office components. So essentially, everything, once you've done trade entry and your basic inventory management, position management, retirement of RECs and that type, or emissions instruments, pretty much everything else, all the way through settlement, it just follows the Allegro 8.0 functionality, uses exactly the same functionality. So there really is little additional that needs to be done in order to get that whole front, mid, back office continuum. And that really very much ties into what Eldon was talking about yesterday about, with 8.0 and then the 8.1 components, you can literally sort of bolt on, overlay one component, a discrete component, and it will work with all of the rest of your 8.0 pieces. What it does is enhances the reference data. You've got key emissions and REC information, RPS, etc. It's specifically designed to capture emissions allowance and renewable energy transactions, all the various characteristics, vintage year, transfer date, program, registry, etc. It'll capture all sorts of different flavors of these instruments. As you all know, Allegro is highly customizable, so you can actually set up your own specific instruments. And because of that flexibility, as new instruments come about, you can actually incorporate them into the system. You can create your own templates in the same way that you would create them for any other commodity. You can get swaps, options, OTCs, exchange-traded futures, etc. Obviously, screenshots here, these are more for reference. You can look at them in more detail when you download the presentation. The other thing I would recommend is if you want to stop by our booth, Doug Towsley, who's actually very much instrumental in one of our implementations right now, can really give you a deep dive into some of the capabilities and the features and what kinds of things are available. But basically, you've got trade capture. Standard reports for mark-to-market P&L, inventory management. You've got three-dimensional pricing. One of the issues, of course, that you have, I mean, when we look at a traditional instrument, say you're trading a future, it's valid for a given month, you trade it on a particular date, and you're good to go. It's deliverable in that particular month, and that's the end of that. Well, in the case of some of these instruments, they may come about as the result of, say, generation in a certain period, but they're actually applicable in a different period, or that period plus an extended period. So it's not, you sort of get this sort of mix of when the instrument came about and when the instrument can be applied. And Allegro handles that type of three-dimensional pricing, where you can say, I have something that came about in '09, it's applicable for 10 and 11, whereas I then have something that came about in, in '09, say it's applicable in '09 and '10, and 10, and then I have something that came about in 2010, that's applicable in 2010 and 2011. Well, now I've got two instruments, different vintages, but basically you could deliver them in 2010. You got match functionality, that allows you to match your long and short positions so that you can manage your inventory level at the certificate level. You got forecasts, actualized renewable generation, and emissions burn data that can be stored in the system as well. Position management, again, rather, even though we tried to blow these up and make them pretty clear, obviously at this distance they're probably fairly hard to see. But again, you can see all of your positions, the usual Allegro drill down capability, filtering, grouping, all of those capabilities exist just as they do for any other component in Allegro. Position management here, you can see where we are matching something. We're going to retire something into Pennsylvania. It will then give us an updated position management screen that will show us our position after that retirement. So what about us? Why are we involved in this? Well, we've been tracking these things pretty much since they started. We've got a deep understanding of the various environmental systems, the registries with which you have to track your instruments. We stay on top of the legislation and how it's driving these markets. How can we help? We've done various different things in this area. We've done business process reviews, we've done business case analysis, we've defined the business requirements and or software requirements, system selections, system implementations, process and procedure analysis and development, and of course, your general project management that we'll do pretty much across the board for any instrument or system. This was actually, it's a bit of a misnomer, it was actually prepared by both me and Doug Towsley, my colleague from Structure. And if you have any further questions, you'd like to chat a little bit more about the types of things we can do, we'd be more than happy to fill you in and give you some more details. And there's contact details if you want to contact us at a later date. On that note, I thank you very much indeed, and enjoy the rest of the day.